Can you hear me? Yeah, sorry, that was a clumsy handover. Cheers, Claire. Hello, everyone. Yeah, all right, I'm late. I'm just going to bring up my notes because I've got 1,000 notes. So if you see my eyes darting around, it's because I'm checking them all because there's loads of gems I don't want to miss out. Excuse me. But welcome to my flat. So my name's Lee, I'm a writer, obviously, and I've been asked by Theatre by the Lake to do this webinar today, which is kind of an introduction to playwriting. And it's quite tricky to talk about being a writer. And I think as with any creative art, a lot of it's instinctive, and I've got a lot of shortcuts and habits about, when I write, but obviously there's some rules that we can talk about today. So I tried to think about how I started and how I start writing a play when I do write one, and hopefully some gems so that you can learn how to do that too. So I'm basically just going to talk at you for about half an hour, and I hope that's all right, about how plays begin to be written and how they are kind of formulated. So I hope that's helpful. So firstly, I'm just going to tell you a bit about me, the boring bit, just so you know why I'm equipped to be telling you all of these gems. So I'm a writer, professional writer. I'm from Workington, which is on the west coast of Cumbria. And I lived there until I was about 20 when I went to Newcastle to do a fine art degree. And that's where I live now. I live in the northeast. And I came to writing really late in life. I didn't start writing until I was about maybe 24, 25. I always thought it was something for other people, how you do, like, oh, it's for clever people who read books, and I didn't really think I was one of them people, so I just didn't bother, and I kind of always fancied it, but I just never tried it. So when I was about 24, 25, I did a free writing course at Gateshead College. I did an introduction to playwriting course, probably better than this one, but it was really good. It was at Live Theatre. And then I just developed my writing and started being a writer from that. So I mainly write for the stage. So I write like straight plays. I write one-person shows. I wrote a play in verse. I once wrote a play in olden day talk about the witch trials of 1650 in Newcastle. So that was fun. I write a lot for radio. And I've done a bit of TV. So I used to work at Corrie. I used to make up the stories that happen on Coronation Street, which was ridiculous because all the stories that can happen on Coronation Street have already happened, so there's not many left. And I also write film, so I'm just about to film my first short film with the BFI, which is called Fist. So my work has a lot of common themes running through it, really. So I write a lot about dysfunctional families. I write a lot about small towns, about sexuality and queerness and otherness, and my work's often dark, funny, and very violent, because I'm just really interested in the extremes of human behaviour, really, good and bad. So sitting down to write can be absolutely terrifying because that blank page is so overwhelming that sometimes you just want to be sick. So I'm going to start by chatting about some of the building blocks of how you start to write a play, and hopefully that will help you to write a play. So any piece of theatre starts with a writer having an idea, basically. And ideas can come in lots of different ways. So they can come like magic. They can come in the shower or in the bath or in rooms other than your bathroom. They can come in the form of an existing story. So you might see like a story in the newspaper or online and think, oh, that's good, I'm going to steal that. That's packed with drama. An idea can come out the mouth of someone else. So your friend can say something clever and you can steal it. That's a good one. Or ideas can come from a what if, like what if dogs could suddenly talk, or what if World War III was about to happen, or what if zombies started taking over the world, but they were like disco dancing zombies, and when they bit you, you started disco dancing until you were so malnourished and so dehydrated that you died. Like, that's terrible. That's a terrible example. They're all quite bad examples, but every one of them could have enough tension and enough comedy and enough drama, really. You could mine any of them and there could be a play, to be fair. So some ideas that you can have are like simple ones, like boy meets girl, girl meets girl, non-binary meets non-binary. They can be conceptual, they can be fish out of water, they can be sci-fi. There's a million genres, and there's probably a million more yet to discover. Really, there's no bad ideas. There are bad ideas, but bad ideas can become good ideas. Like A Little Shop of Horrors on paper probably sounds terrible, but it's a brilliant musical. So, point in fact. So once you've got your idea, the way to start is, when I start a play, I always forget how to start a play. So I have this weird ritual where I'll Google how to write a play because I can't remember how I wrote the last one. And it's become a bit of a weird habit now. Like my mind goes blank, but then I remember, Google tells me that most stories, all stories, are about one character that wants one thing. And so that's always a really good place to start. So then I'll look at my idea, and that's what you should do. Look at your idea and go, who is it about and what do they want? And that's a really good starting point. And then once I've got a sense of that character, I'll start to build them up, and I'll flesh them out, and I'll give them a name, I'll give them a job, I'll work out if they're happy or not, I'll work out who they love, if they've got phobias, if they've got any secrets, if they've got someone else's secret, which is potentially more interesting, who they hate, who they want to kill. There's endless possibilities, because we as humans are really, really complex people. And when you sit down to imagine a character, you can't imagine all that stuff at once. You've got to do it bit by bit. You've got to do it mostly as the play develops. But you've got to have a starting point. So you've got to kind of lay those first few breadcrumbs to allow yourself to explore that character, and thereby explore that story as well. So once you've got a sense of who the character is, you need to think about where they're going. Think about what their journey is through the play, and their emotional journey towards their want is the story, really. So stories in plays work in three ways. So you'll maybe heard that plays have a 3-act structure that I still find confusing, but it's not. It's just beginning, middle, and end. Like, that's what they don't tell you. Like, that's the simple bit. So it's beginning, middle, and end. So it's often you introduce an idea, you complicate an idea, and then you resolve an idea. And that's all it is. It's got the same structure as a story you might tell your friend in the pub, or a joke you might tell. So Act 1 will be introduction, where you establish who the character is and what they want and how they think they're going to get it. And Act 2 will be where it gets complicated, where you put as many obstacles as you can think of in the way of that character. So someone once said that it's like putting your character in a tree and throwing stones at them, because you're kind of trying to stop them to get what they want, because you're trying to make them grow as a character and make them develop and make them realize their own strength and their own power, which is lush. And then Act 3, which is your resolution, is your ending, really. So it's, do they or do they not get their want? Do they get to go to prom? Do they die? Do they find forgiveness? Do they appease their guilt? Do they cut the wire on the bomb? Like, that's the bit of tension where you go, oh, I hope they get it. And sometimes they do. Mostly they do, but sometimes they don't. And it's entirely up to you, because it's your story. So once you've got your 3 acts, I feel like I'm really racing through this, but there's lots to get in. Once you've got your 3 acts, you need to think about what kind of moments, what kind of story beats you're going to have within those acts. And depending what your character's want is, there'll be moments that instantly have to be included in your play. There'll be moments that you get for free. So this is my bad example, which is that your character wants to win a best Jammy Dodger competition at the village fete. Okay. So if you were going to write that play, there's moments that we instantly know that we're going to have to see within that story. So the character's going to have to find out about the competition. They're going to have to want to enter the competition, but have a bit of inner conflict, because they're like, oh, are my Jammy Dodgers good enough, or they're just rubbish? You're going to have a bit where a kind friend comes round and goes, do you know what, they're really tasty. I think you could absolutely nail this. And then we're going to have to see that character baking some Jammy Dodgers, and they'll probably start out like really leathery and rubbish, but then they'll get like really crisp, like on Bake Off. And then obviously there'll be competition day when it's like, who do they win or do they not win? So that's a simple rubbish version. But then they're the obvious moments that you'll have in that play, but then there'll be moments that aren't that obvious to you, but are worth thinking about because they will make your play more interesting. And those moments will be about why that character wants to win that competition. You know, is it for the prize money, or is it because their dead mum won it 20 years ago, and in winning the competition they're going to feel closer to their dead mum? You know, is it because they hate the judge and they want to poison them by putting glass in the jam? You know, are they baking for their life? As a gangster said, win that competition or I'll set your house on fire. You know, there are possibilities. So that's good. So once you've got your character and your goal / want and your bit of a story, it doesn't necessarily have to be biscuit based. It's helpful to think about where your play is set. Yeah, your idea might dictate that, and it might not. And different places offer different problems and different solutions to your story. So say your protagonist wants to be a trapeze artist, you're probably not going to set her in a jail, are you? Because that's going to be a slow burner. But say your protagonist wants to be a good swimmer, then you could probably set her at a swimming baths and realize that want quite easily. So you need to think about the dramatic potential of environments. Things like libraries are bad because they're boring. Things like zoos are good because there's tigers and there's zebras and there's cheeky monkeys, and that's always good. So at this stage, when I'm writing, when I'm trying to think about where it's set, I work really visually. So I'll find loads of pictures of like where the play's set, and I'll print them all off and I'll put them around me writing room like a serial killer, and I'll build boards on Pinterest of like characters' faces and things like that. And I'll work out what they look like, what the parents look like. I'll find a picture of their first car, and I'll just try and populate that entire world with a visual kind of landscape, so that when I'm wanting to kind of disappear into it and write it, I've got like shortcuts to it. So I'll think about what books are on the character's bookshelf. I'll think about what their flat's like. Is it always cold? Is it empty? Is it really full? Are they a bit of a hoarder? Because our immediate worlds they're just extensions of us, aren't they? They're often a reflection of what our inner world looks like. And you can use that to your, like, massively to your advantage. You can create shortcuts by surrounding your characters with certain things so that actually they do a lot of the work for you. It's also important, I was going to say impossible, it's important to think about, and this is something I always do when I'm starting writing, is what's really at the heart of it, what's at the heart of the play, why I'm writing it, why I care really, because I need to care in order for the audience to care, and for the audience to keep watching it as well. So I kind of have a moment and think, what's it really about? Yeah, it's about disco dancing zombies, but is it about the desire to dance? Is it about the need for creative expression? Is it about loneliness? Is it about fear of death? Is it about grief? Is it just one big metaphor for veganism? Like, all of that. And that's an important question to ask, because you can get run away with yourself. It's important to know what's at the heart of it, because that will ultimately drive it. And it's absolutely fine, and in my opinion, really, really important if that truth is something that already lives inside of you. You know, you can write about things and people that hurt you. You know, you can write about your parents or the boy who dumped you once. Write about that horrible thing someone said to you when you were 5-year-old and you've never forgot, because we've all got those things and they still hurt. Like, we never forget them. So, like, use them. Like, writing can be really therapeutic and really cathartic, and you can work a lot of things out in your writing. You know, it can be really good. Dialogue is next on my list. So dialogue, as you all know, is the conversation that happens within a play. So dialogue drives a play, really. It's what a play is. A play is just a list of instructions of where to stand and what to say in order to tell a story. So dialogue is really important. When I first started writing, I really struggled with dialogue, because I think a lot of writers do, and I still do sometimes, but it's hard to write sentences that sound spontaneous and reactive and real. it's hard to write sentences that sound like they're being written in your head as you're saying it. It's really hard to do that. So I've kind of got three, I wouldn't say top tips as to what can help you write good dialogue. So the first one, obvious, is to just practice. You know, you're gonna have to write a lot of bad dialogue before you write good dialogue. Yeah, so that's good. It's like with bacon jammy dodgers. They'll only get better. You know, your dialogue will start off leathery and then it'll get crisp, and that's a metaphor. So number 2 tip for your dialogue is to really listen to how people talk. Because we start sentences in the middle of sentences, we don't finish sentences, we don't answer questions, we lie and we deceive, and we talk in riddles and we have to make no sense, and we ramble. I'm rambling now, like it's ridiculous. I'm not talking full sentences. I'm in this race with my brain for what I want to say and what I should say, and I'm trying to sound interesting and inspiring because I want you all to go away and write a play and be your brilliant selves. But you know, it's hard. You need to listen to how people are communicating, and when you start to listen to conversations and to people as a writer, it's much easier to begin to write authentic dialogue, because you realize that we don't talk politely to one another. Really, we don't walk into a room and go, hello, how are you? You know, we walk into a room and we go, oh, someone was just sick on the bus. Or we walk into a room and go, guess who just texted? Or we walk into a room and go, why does it stink in here? What have you been doing? So, and my third tip for writing good dialogue is read plays. Read plays, because plays are brilliant because they're full of dialogue, and some plays have dialogue that is hyper real, and some plays have really heightened dialogue, and there's some plays where language just disintegrates completely, and that's as much of a joy. So it's really, really looking at how people communicate and how you want your characters to communicate, really. And also within that, think about silence, because it's not just about making noise all the time. Like, silence can be deafening, can't it? So people don't always make noise, and they're often more interesting when they're not making noise. You know, there's a real tension there, and plays are about creating tension, creating a pressure cooker. You know, if you tell someone you love them and they don't say anything back, that's much more interesting than them saying I love you, unless that's you or me. Like, that wouldn't be nice. But if it's in a play, it's good, you know. So those are our main kind of building blocks of a play. So next I'm going to talk about how you take those and you begin to build them into a play. You build your playhouse or whatever it is. So that's going to be our process. So there's as many different ways to make a play as there are ideas for a play. So there's 3 different kind of processes that I use when I'm making theatre. And they're all very different, but they all equal a play at the end of it. And I wanted to talk about this because I think it's important to understand that in order to write a play, you don't have to just sit in the house on your own and write a play. Having said that, number 1 is sitting in a house on your own and writing a play. Obviously, it's one of them. You know, I've got to get it out the way. So that one can be the loneliest, but it can be the most rewarding because no one can see how many hobnobs you're eating. So that's a win. You're in complete control. You can write that one draft that is just for you, that no one's looking over your shoulder going, oh, well, that's rubbish. I wouldn't do that. Why is he doing that? That's crap. So it's good. It's quite rewarding in that sense. And when I'm working that way, I kind of go into planning overdrive. So I'm a bit of a control freak, and I need to know exactly what's going to happen in my play, even though I know that 2 pages / 2 minutes into my play, everything's going to change. I still have to go into it feeling like I know exactly every beat that's going to happen. So I plan that. So what I do is I kind of sit, and for a full length play, which is like, say 100 minutes, I'll sit and I'll think, right, well, where's my character at the very start of scene 1, and where are they just before the lights all go out at the very end, when we're all breaking our hearts and having a great time and going, wow, what a great play. And I'll take those 2, the beginning and the end, and I'll go, what, for 100 minutes, what 100 brilliant things could happen to that character to get them from A to B. And that's going to be my story. So I'll brainstorm all the millions of brilliant things that could happen, and I'll just make a list of them in order, and that'll become my plan, really. And I'll try and make sure that every single minute something brilliant happens, whether it's a really funny line, or someone tells an absolutely painful truth, or someone sings a song, or there's a good physical gag. And I try and damage limitate the process by going, something good is going to happen every single minute. So if the audience switch off or they don't buy into that, there's only a minute to wait till the next thing happens. And like I say, everything always absolutely changes, but it's like I have to do that ritual in order to be able to go into the play, because it's such an overwhelming landscape to just walk into and try and be the master of and try and control what everyone's saying when you don't even quite know these people. So anyway, that's just my crazy brain, so that might help you. So the second process that I use quite a lot is one called devising, which you may or may not know. It's like improvising, really. And that's more collaborative than sitting in my house eating lots of hobnobs. So I have a company called Encounter that I run with my friend Jen. It's like a theatre dance company. So she's a choreographer and I'm a writer, obviously. We make a lot of work that explores the meeting points between dance and writing. So often our work is kind of like a play but with loads of movement, or a dance piece but with loads of text. It dances that fine line between those two art forms that aren't often like in very separate buildings, let alone on different programs. So that's what we do, and the way in which we make work is that me and Jen and then one actor and one contemporary dancer will all get in a room. So there'll be the four of us, and we'll just start to have conversations about ideas, and then we'll get the actor and the dancer to improvise those characters. So we'll be like, okay, well, I'm trying to think of a job. You're a baker and you live in Ipswich, and you've just found something scary under the bed. And then they'll kind of improvise that scene, and then we'll bring the other character in and go, okay, well, you're such and such and you think this, and that sounds terrible, but we'll just try out loads of different ideas, loads of different characters. And instead of just imagining the characters, it allows us to briefly meet them and kind of collectively imagine their lives and their history and their hopes and their dreams and their fears. And we'll do that process for like 2 weeks, and we'll end up with reams and reams and reams of characters and information and plot lines and moments and lines and movement languages and things like that. And I will have written everything down throughout that process, and then afterwards I will kind of curate it all into a piece of theatre. And that's one process, that's one way of doing it, and it's really brilliant. And the third process I want to talk about is kind of like that one, but even more collaborative, because there's more people involved. And it's a process that I work within when I work with Young Company in Northern Stage. So Northern Stage is a theatre in the Northeast, and I work with a Young Company there, which is like their youth theatre. And so it's a company of young actors who we work with over several years, not several years to make one show. So and this will bring us on to a piece of writing that we're going to talk about that I think you've been sent, called Waiting for Superman, which was a piece that I wrote for the Young Company 2 years ago. So with Encounter, where there's like 4 of us in a room, with Young Company, there'll be about 30, usually. There's like 20 in the company. There'll be me, a director, a sound designer. There's often a BSL signer there. And we'll do a process that will take over months, and we will create fiction but based in truth. So we will share stories, and we'll share interests, and we'll share music and YouTube videos. And it's just interesting that, you know, like I was saying, where ideas come from, like ideas can just come from having a conversation with someone, or from 2 people going, I'm interested in this and I'm interested in this, but those 2 things equal something ultimately more interesting. And themes will emerge from that process that we do, and experiences will emerge, and they'll demand a response, and there'll be conversations that we just can't shake off, and there'll be voices that kind of rise up that just have to be heard. And And from that experience and those conversations, me and the writers and members of the company will all go away and try to dramatise and capture that kind of thunder that we found in the room into monologues or little stories or little scenes or songs or poems or whatever. But there'll be responses that really have at the heart of them that kind of shared kind of idea and that shared passion. So the writing example we're going to look at is one such piece, and it is called Waiting for Superman. And I'm hoping you've all read it. So it was written in response to a conversation at Young Company with one of the young people there, and that young person was working. So the young person was heroing, which at the time I didn't know what it was, but and you maybe do, but I'm going to tell you anyway if you don't. Heroing is where you dress up as a superhero and you go and you perform as that superhero at a child's birthday party. So you'll dress up as Spider-Man or Superman or like Wonder Woman or the Hulk. I can't think of any more. And you'll go to a children's birthday party, but the child thinks it's the real one, and that's brilliant. So we're not going to look at the whole piece. We're just going to look at the very end of it, which was, I mean, it works like a declaration of love, really. So I'll quickly tell you about what the whole piece was about, because I don't think you have had that sent through, and then we can take a look at it. So I forgot the title then. Waiting for Superman is a monologue, which means it's told from one person's point of view directly to the audience. And it's the story of two lads. So in the excerpt, I think you've got the characters are called A and B, but it was written for and performed by two male actors. And those characters were called Charlie and Ryan, who both hero together. So they both do this dressing up thing. And an inevitable part of that is spending time before and after each party getting changed in front of one another in these like middle-class mums' bedrooms. And it's about the way in which Charlie, as an hyper-masculine lad, begins to realise his attraction to Ryan. So it's about how he processes and begins to understand his sexuality, really. And it's ultimately about how he admits it. And he tells Ryan about his feelings for him, which is the excerpt that you have got. So it's a love story. It's boy meets boy. The character is Charlie and the want is Ryan. But as the play develops, it becomes about lots of different wants and needs, invariably, as any story would. It becomes about the need for acceptance. It becomes about Charlie's desire for Ryan to reciprocate those feelings. It's about what it is to be super and how we all are, in our very own ways, heroes. So what I'm going to do now is try and bring it up onto the screen and share my screen, and then we can look at what it's doing, how it's doing it, and why it's doing it. But I am as technologically savvy as a very, very old woman, so bear with me 1 second while I try and share my screen. Okay, I think that's it. I think I've done it. I'm just going to go ahead. Okay, so this excerpt, it's an admission from Charlie that when he and Ryan are in those bedrooms getting changed, those middle-class mums' bedrooms, that he's half there and he's half not there. He's pretending that it's their bedroom, that what's in the room are their things, that they're a couple and it's their first home together. So Charlie's essentially spilling his kind of inner world into this room. He's spilling out his fantasies and his preoccupations, and he uses the objects in the room in a transformative way. He transforms them into his and Ryan's things in the hope that his admission will transform Ryan into his. And he's very articulate in this, and he's very honest, and he's not at all subtle. He hasn't left himself any breadcrumbs. If it backfires, he can't go, oh, sorry, I was only joking. Like, he's being absolutely brutally and beautifully vulnerable. Sorry, it's a lot of long words in one sentence. And Charlie's quite a simple character. He's a lad who goes to work and he goes to the gym and he goes for a pint, and he's from a world where that's meant to be enough. But in this speech, he's saying that's not enough, that he wants other things. He wants Ryan. He wants a home, you know. He wants belongings because he wants to belong. And he's saying it's possible for us to want more. And he's laying his case out like a lawyer. There's something quite forensic about the way he talks about love. And we see his absolute want. We see Charlie at his most vulnerable. And we also don't know if Ryan will respond positively or negatively. So it's quite a dangerous position for Charlie to put himself in. There's risk and there's tension. And I think that's what makes it interesting. And hitting the opposites that exist within that speech is another thing that makes it interesting. So it's dangerous, but it's beautiful, and it's tragic, but it's uplifting, and it's unashamedly sentimental. But Charlie's also dressed as Spider-Man, so that kind of undercuts it again. And I picked this section because it gives you a small insight into how big moments can be achieved in quite quiet ways. So there's no shouting in this moment, like no one throws a chair at someone's head and no one takes out a gun, but players don't have to be loud to be impactful, you know. And it comes back to that power of silence, you know. Ryan doesn't have to say a word. And this isn't the end of the play. In reality, of course, he reciprocated his feelings, and they did like a dirty dance and lift, and it was a happy ending because I'm a sucker for happy endings. But yeah, I'm going to try and stop sharing my screen now, so bear with. I'm back when I get my script up. So we are, I think, coming to an end nearly, unless I've said everything so fast. It's only been about 5 minutes. But I wanted to talk now about what to do with your play once you've written it, which is ideally get someone to read it, or even better, get some of your pals together once it's not illegal to get them all together in your house and read it out loud, because, you know, players are meant to be heard out loud, so it's really good to hear them in that way in order to be able to kind of judge them in that way. And you need people to tell you the truth, to be honest, about whether it's any good or not. And of course, you're going to want them to tell you it's the best play ever written and that we should burn all other players like they're cackling witches because this is the only play we'll ever need for the rest of our lives. And every time I start and finish a play, I'm like, this is probably going to be the best play ever. And you should think like that. You should have had that absolute confidence in yourself. But the reality is that, you know, when you finish the first draft, there's going to be some holes in it, and you're going to need someone to tell you what's wrong and where those holes are and why that bit isn't as funny as you thought it was. And it's brutal, but it's inevitable. I still shudder when I get notes. I once got one note that I had clearly never forgotten or quite gotten over, but I'm going to share it with you. And it was the note that my 60-minute play was ruined by the last 59 minutes. And to be honest, they were right, you know, and that's the hard truth. Like, people give you terrible notes, but they're often right. So 9 times out of 10, you just have to give them a really canny smile and then go away and do what they said. Yeah, so once you've edited and redrafted it, you can send it off out into the world. And there's lots of resources for new writers. There's lots of opportunities and competitions and things to break through into and with. The BBC Writers' Room has a really, really brilliant website that is worth checking out. When I first started writing, they used to have a lot of competitions on there for like short radio dramas or short whatever dramas. And I would write one for every single one of them because it gave me a deadline. It made me finish something. And if we don't have a deadline, we'll never finish it because writing's really hard and sometimes really boring. But if someone's saying, I want it by 6 o'clock at this day, then you'll more often than not do it. And then a lot of new writing theatres have like open submission windows where you can send them your work and you can get feedback on it, or they might give you script reports. I'm not sure what the Theatre by the Lakes protocol on that is, but I'm pretty sure if you send them a play, they're going to read it. I've lost my players. Yeah, so you basically send slightly better play after slightly better play into the world until one sticks. You know, until someone rings you up and goes, you've done it, this is really good, we want to put it on our stage. And that might be your first play, it might be your 50th. With me, it was probably about my 7th. You know, I wrote a lot of bad plays and a lot of bad dialogue before something mildly interesting fell out of my hands. So also don't be disheartened, because it's hard work. And I can't stress how important it is, and I can't stress how important it is enough to read plays, and read reviews, and look at what is being made and why it's being made, and read your favourite plays over and over, and try to work out why they're good, try to work out why they keep making you laugh, and why they make your heart skip a beat every time you hit that certain line, because that is the gold dust. And it's often just that they're telling you the truth. They're telling you something truthful about the world or the human condition or yourself that you hadn't articulated. So try to do that. Try to just be really honest with your audience about how brilliant and hard it is to be a human being, because it's a million things all at once. And if you can capture that, then you're onto an absolute winner. But always lean into your weirdness, you know, always lean into your instinct, and because that's where all the best ideas live, and, you know, that's where all the best stories live, you know. And I think I am absolutely done now. That's the end of my big speech. So I'm going to have a look at questions. I think I'm going to go into chat and look at questions.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody's got any questions for Lee, we've got 5 minutes, maybe a bit more. Pop them in the chat box, and I'm sure he will answer them.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's also worth saying, just off the back of what Lee was saying about getting your plays read as well. I know that a lot of you already are members of the Cumbrian Creatives Network. If you're not, you know, absolutely do sign up for that mailing on our website, because a lot of what we send out are things like opportunities for writers, opportunities for directors, not just in Cumbria but also nationwide as well. So, you know, get yourself signed up for that if you want to hear a little bit more about the opportunities that we hear about at the theatre.
Mm-hmm.
A question: have you got any plans to write about Workington?
Oh wow, that's a really good question, actually, Emily. Thank you. I have written a play about Workington. Actually, I wrote a play called Hares last year, which was shortlisted for the Bruntwood Prize, which is a prize that the Royal Exchange runs every 2 years, and it's just open submission. So when you've written your plays, you can send them in. And I wrote a play called Hares, which was about, I'm trying to remember, it was about 3 14-year-old girls called Shania, Whitney and Courtney, who lived in Workington. And it was basically about how that small town kind of wasn't built for them as women. So it was kind of about misogyny, and it was a lot about violence against women, to be honest. And they happened upon this kind of underground snuff tape thing that was going on in the town, and they got themselves into a lot of trouble. And it was like about how 3 14-year-old girls can actually be more powerful than an entire town if they put their minds to it. So hopefully that'll be coming to a stage sometime soon. But yeah, so that was my play about Workington.
Amazing. I would love to read that.
Yeah, really dark.
A couple more questions coming through the chat. Are you ever asked to write to order?
Oh, that's good. I'm not asked to write to order. I'm asked by theatres to go in and pitch players. So they'll say, come and tell us an idea. And if they like it, they'll kind of commission it. I've never really been in a situation where they've told me what to write, or anyone's given me those kind of really key parameters. I haven't done that. I think that would feel a bit weird, kind of cutting my cloth to fit someone else's costume. So no, I haven't done that as yet, but you never know. If the right idea comes along, maybe. But no. There's another one. Should I just answer that? It's from Lee. Any experience or thoughts about producing, staging your own writing post-COVID, obviously, as a way of getting it performed? So I kind of produced it myself anyway. The work that I do with Jen with Encounter, like we run that company, so we produce that work ourselves. So we, you know, we apply for arts council money, and we get grants off the arts council money, and we get different pots of money off certain trusts and foundations who agree to support our work. So we kind of budget and produce and book that tour, and then do all of that stuff in-house. So we're very much self-sufficient in that way, which is another way to make your own work. It's to fund it and produce it yourself, which I've done in the past as well. It gives you brilliant control over it, and it means you don't have to get a theatre to buy into your idea, because you can just make it happen yourself. Okay, I'm just going to work through these. For Catherine, I love the comment you started at a late age at 22, 23. I'm 61 and just starting out. Any hope for me? Yeah, there's absolutely hope for you. You've probably got all the best stories because you're 61. Like, I would love to pick your brains a bit. That would be fantastic. Like, yeah, because when I started writing late, I didn't feel like I had anything to say, and I still don't feel like I've got anything to say about the world, but I'm pretty sure you will at 61. Have you ever written a character you'd like to revisit? From Emily. I wrote a play once called Donna Disco, which was a one-woman show about, excuse me, this 14-year-old girl who was bullied at school, like horrifically, and it was kind of based on this girl I knew when I was younger, and it was one of the first plays I wrote, and it really, really just came straight out of my heart with kind of all those memories and all that sadness from my teenagers, and I think about her a lot, not the real girl, the character girl, and I kind of wonder what she's up to now, which is weird because I made her up. So I would actually like to revisit her. I might do that. Is there a play you wish you'd written? From Carrie. I keep a list of plays to write. Every time I have an idea for a play, I put it in a list. So I have a list of plays backed up that I need to write. So there's lots of plays, or plays that I wish I'd written, an existing play that I'd wish I'd written. I'm going to answer that angle of the question as well. Yeah, I'm a massive fan of Joe Orton. I think he's an absolute genius. And I wish that I had written Loot, because I think it's a really, 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 really funny player. And Morgan, have you found lockdown to be either a help or a hindrance with your creativity? That's a brilliant question. Because a lot of my friends are in the creative industry, and everyone's reacted really, really differently to it. To be honest, when lockdown happened, a bit of me was like, this is great because it's just going to clear time for me to absolutely, there's going to be no distractions. I'm just going to be able to sit in my house and generate work. But I wasn't able to do that for a long time. I think there was just something, there's just a bad energy around, isn't there, at the minute? And it's just, there's a lot of sadness around, and that just, you can kind of feel it in your bones. So yeah, I found it really difficult to write for maybe a month or so. So I kind of busied myself with other things, and then I'm back into the stride of it now. So hopefully if we're going to lockdown again, I'll be more productive than I was in the last lockdown. And Wendy says, Loot is the only play I left in the interval. That's amazing though. Like, there's loads of plays that other people love that I absolutely hate. It's like, I'm really critical. So often people are like, that's the best play ever. And I'm like, no, I didn't like it. And it's fine. It's absolutely brilliant. Like, have those opinions and, totally do that. Like, we can't all like all of the plays all of the time. And we shouldn't, because that would be weird. So yeah, that's fine that you don't like Loot. I'm not foaming at all. But there's lots of other plays, so make sure you find some plays that you can watch all the way till the end to inspire you one day. Yeah. Is that it for the questions?
Great. Yeah, I think that seems to be
that. Oh
no, we've got one popped in.
Okay, I'm going to go in and read this from Catherine. It can be disheartening when you do get others to read your work and they don't understand the language. I wrote a first draft and showed it to a group of mainly international friends, and they couldn't pick up or get the northern accent humour. Do some players simply not travel? And the truth is, yeah, some players won't translate. my plays are very, very northern, and they don't always land in, you know, places like London. They just don't get it. I did a play on in London about 8 years ago at the Bush called Chalet Lines, which was about a group of northern women who went to Butlins every year, and it was just a kind of twisted dark comedy about women and mothers and things like that. And I remember going to see it in London and being absolutely kind of destroyed, actually, because the vibe wasn't let's celebrate these women. The vibe was let's look at these northern people, and it just felt a bit like a circus, and it really upset me. And yeah, so some northern plays won't travel, but that doesn't mean they're great, because a lot of London plays don't travel because they're not good as well. Yeah, but yeah, it's tricky with people's opinions and getting notes. One of my friends once said that only take notes off people that you really trust. You know, if someone's giving you notes and actually you don't value their opinion, then you don't have to, you still don't have to value it if they're giving you notes on your play or they've taken the time to read your play, you know. So just get people you trust to read it. And I'm sure you did trust these friends, but, you know, if they didn't get it, then that's their loss, isn't it? You know, and people are going to struggle with those different accents and things. But I hope you find the right people to like it. I directed Neville's Island. Wendy says great play. I don't know Neville's Island, but I'll Google it and read it. That the one, I'm assuming that's the one you stayed and watched till the end, so that's good. Thanks, Catherine, that's lovely. Good, cool.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Any more?
Cool. Well, if you do you know, think of any further questions, you know, feel free to you should all have my email address. Ping me an email and I can absolutely get them answered for you. We have actually run out of time, unfortunately. It just flies, doesn't it? But
it does, because I was having fun. Thank you so much. I was really nervous about that, but I really enjoyed it, and I just hope it helps some of you write, because it can be really joyous. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Lee. That was so interesting to hear some of the ideas and the thought processes that go into writing. I've kind of said this to everybody this week, that actually I've learned something from everybody that I didn't know already. Because even though in theatre we spend a lot of time working with writers, directors, actors, a lot of the time when you're working with them, they're in the process already, so they don't have the time to step back and explain to you how they do what they do and why they do what they do. So it's been so interesting for me to just be able to sit back and listen to how all these processes work start to finish, rather than just experiencing them as part of the production process, which we normally do. And yeah, just as a side note, if anybody does want to write the Jammy Dodger gangster competition play, I will personally,
they're free.
I'll personally petition to have that commissioned at Theatre by the Lake. I think that sounds absolutely cracking.
I'll watch it.
But brilliant. No, thank you, everybody. As just a reminder that all of these sessions are available on YouTube. They'll be available from Monday on our YouTube channel. So if you want to rewatch anything, make sure you've got all of your hints and tips written down. If you're in the midst of writing a play and think, oh, what did Lee say? That would be, you know, that bit of advice would be really helpful at this precise moment. You know, you can go back and rewatch. But if not, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really great.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. That was lush.